Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Tier Time, the show where I get niche with it. And this month, to kick off 2024 and to lean into 2023 sunsetting, I'm going to do a dive on what I'd argue was my biggest disappointment of last year, considering the franchise in question and the like, Mortal Kombat 1. While still fun to play, because like I said in my best of video, NetherRealm still know how to make a good fighting game. One of the other things I love about Mortal Kombat is its world, its story, its characters, to the point that I've made both best and worst lists of my favorites and least favorites of the characters within the series as a whole. With this second reimagining of its origins, we see the character of Liu Kang in the status of a god who reshapes the universe in his image. And it turns out some wild results of varying degrees of quality, while also keeping some things relatively the same. And in today's episode of this show, I'm gonna rank all of the changes Liu Kang made to the characters, or rank the characters from least to best in the echelon of how much I liked the changes Liu Kang made to their character. Some of them, again, huge. Some of my favorite characters I feel like got ruined in this. And some characters that I would say I don't like were made a lot better, or at least a lot more interesting. With that in mind, I'm actually going to sort of reorganize the squares here. F through S just doesn't quite get niche enough with it this time. I gotta switch some shit around. And just like that, we have the tiers in this new fashion. I'll dive right into it just because we've got one person each for the bottom two tiers, but we'll get into these as we go along. Ermac, I'm so sorry what they did to you. Ermac is one of my favorite characters in Mortal Kombat if you haven't seen my best characters list. I love the idea of the character. I love the concept of this cobbling of souls into one entity that has magic powers. And to sort of just throw a curveball in that by just making him the reincarnation of the lost king of Edenia, it's just not, it's not it, man. I hate that change. I think it sucks. I think it makes it so much more boring. It makes them so not interesting. And it's because I also don't like some of the other changes they made to drive that character concept home, and that I'll get into later on in the video. But yeah, Ermac, one of my favorite characters, made terrible. And then above that, Reiko, the dumb bitch. Just because Reiko sucks. Reiko is one of my least favorite characters. And in the new entry, I still could give a rat's ass about him. Equally as such, I don't like Reiko, the dumb bitch, so Reiko, the dumb bitch, gets his own tier. I just don't like the character of Reiko. They have potential with the concepts that I don't like that they introduced in MK1 to do some cool things with the character of Reiko, but I don't really care. You could argue it's equally as bad as the Ermac thing, but the Ermac thing is so much worse, because Ermac as a concept, as a character, as an idea, is just boiled down so stupidly in MK1. But Reiko just stays constantly dumb. And a change that I like, but like I don't think makes the characters necessarily better. They're just kind of changed for plot purposes in a way that makes sense. The villains, Shao Kahn, Quan Chi, and Shang Tsung, they're fine. Like making Shao Kahn a general for Sindel makes sense. Quan Chi like being sent to the mines for life, and Shang Tsung being a sort of down in his luck merchant, selling lies to people. I mean, to like live a life of nothing. They all kind of make sense. They feel like the sort of fate somebody would craft for their worst enemy to give them the dullest life possible. It's fine. I don't hate them. I like the designs of the characters too, which I also didn't talk about. Reiko's design really didn't change. That's how uninteresting the character is. And I don't like the change they made to Ermac visually. The designs for these three, they're totally fine. I don't hate any of it at all. I think that it's all fine. now with the sort of extreme outliers and change for the plot in ways that, like, are fine, if not non-preventable in any sort of indiscernible way. They kind of feel like a product of the creative decision more so than the rest of these. Let's get into the creative decisions made to change all of these characters in interesting and non-interesting ways, both bad and good, and also kind of putting the essentially non-change, because there are some that end up not really all that different in the core of the story / their own identity. But let's start with the bad. Let's start with people who I don't like the changes made by Liu Kang when shaping a timeline in his vision. Starting with a character that I'm kind of indifferent about. So, like, it's not necessarily like a what the hell, but, like, why do that, is Rain. Rain had like a godlike lineage, and now he's just a guy. He kind of ends up in a similar place, it feels like, maybe allegiance-wise by the end, but in the new timeline, he's just a guy who's good at water magic. And that's cool, but, like, you're not as cool as you used to be. For somebody whose name whose name and iconography evokes the late great prince to be boiled down to just, like, cool wizard. I don't know. It's not nearly as neat, even if, again, I've never really been much of a voucher for Rain as a whole. If I'm gonna stick up for him, it's gonna be when they change him and make him not nearly as interesting. Even if he also is sort of a byproduct, or his lack of fleshing out in some aspects in the broader world also led to one of the more uninteresting decisions in the series lineage, as far as, like, the heroes of Armageddon being his siblings. But, like, whatever. I like the idea of him having this divine lineage more so than just what he's got going on. In a more intense breath, though, I think they did my boy Hanzo dirty by just getting rid of Hanzo Hasashi altogether. Kuai Lang is fine, but Hanzo Hasashi, I think, is a more interesting Scorpion, especially with, like, the iconography, the image of Scorpion, and the idea of what a Scorpion is, what Hanzo Hasashi was with the character in relation to his story arc across the first 3 games, is not as compelling as being Sub-Zero's brother. Beyond, I don't think changes a whole lot, which is shocking, given I think that they have this very symbiotic relationship. You know, there's some people that don't like the first movie because they aren't a component of the story, but, you know, take what you can give. I think in this instance, making them brothers is worse than just putting them under Shang Tsung's spell, as was the case in the Paul W.S. Anderson movie. I don't like it. I mean, again, mechanic-wise, he's great. I played some Scorpion online. He's fun. I still like playing him. I just don't like what they did with this character in his, like, in this version of the universe. I just think it's bad. I think it's not my thing. Oddly enough, there's a different dynamic to that I think is better, because it takes a character that felt kind of innocuous and made them more interesting. In the vein of, like, changing a character's core identity, though, and, like, doing it for the worse, like Scorpion Melina, I also think is kind of bad. And it's almost worse because she's a core part of the story. And I'll just talk about this now since Baraka's not until later on in the list. I hate that they made Tarkatan like a disease. I really don't like that. There's other things that, like, are gone in the greater Mortal Kombat mythos that I don't think are nearly as affected quite yet, or could be wrought out amidst the removal of them in this timeline, which could create an interesting sort of narrative. But again, Tarkatan being a disease is weird, and Melina just being the blood sibling of Sindel and Melina, or Sindel and Katana, and just having Tarkatan and having it to be treated and having it be a part of, like, creating the divide within the plot, I just didn't like. And I didn't like that aspect of the character being changed, because I think it's an interesting sort of part of the Mortal Kombat mythos that sort of leans into the meta commentary of like clone fighters in a sort of way, or at least could be seen as that. And I just don't think that making those siblings is nearly as interesting. Honestly, while looking at the list, though, even if I'll have complaints about other parts of the character's mythos being changed, or like parts of the character being changed that affect the mythos in ways that I don't like, as far as like from a character perspective, they kind of benefit him for the better in comparison to, in some instances, who they were in past timelines. But as far as like having the biggest negative impact for being changed for plot purpose, for being changed not for plot purposes, I feel like these three are probably the worst. With that being said, there's also a handful where, while parts of the character may change because of those dynamics or just other odd reasons, they're essentially the same character, with the one exception being Jiris, who's really just the same character. He keeps all of his memories from all the timelines and is there to sort of protect this one and keep it from going awry. It's an interesting character dynamic, but really the one character who has the least changed and is the general middle point of the list as far as like the most firm. This character is just I could give Jiris his own part of the tier, honestly, for Jiris, who doesn't change in a way that isn't just Reiko's stupid ass. But another character that essentially is the same as far as like how they affect the plot, Johnny Cage. Yeah, he doesn't have his powers, and he's not with Sonya, at least not right now. But, I mean, he's a movie star who does action stuff and is in this tournament for Hollywood purposes. I like the character. I like him in the game. Like him for the same reasons in this game. That's kind of essentially a driving component of parts of this tier as well. Johnny Cage may be different in soul, but is the same in spirit. Another character that also is pretty much almost the same exactly is Kung Lao, only now instead of being friends with Liu Kang, he's now friends with Raiden. He's still Ken-ass Ken with his hat. Still got some great moments in the story as far as like the character being the character. Another constant in the world as shaped by Liu Kang in a way that is perfectly fine. She is a princess through and through and is the longtime love interest of Liu Kang and not really changed to protect her image in his eyes, I'm assuming. Kitana. Basically the same. I like Kitana. I got no real negative or positive feelings about the character. My mom mained Kitana when I was a kid. Kitana radiates Kitana energy in this game's universe, or in this game's particular timeline, outside of having a more intimate sister relationship with Melina. I feel like there's not really much different about the character. I feel like Sindel has more going on as far as like difference, and it's because her character's attitude is just changed to be a little less evil. But for as far as like good person staying a good person, Kitana is that. Now, as far as in the context of this first game, that might change in games down the line, but I would argue, even though he's not destined to be Noob Saibot, he doesn't have a gang to rival against in the form of the Shirai Ryu, and his sort of kindred spirit is now his brother, and he's got another brother. Beyond feels kind of like the same in the Mortal Kombat 1 kind of sense. I'm sure in the sequel he'll be changed a little more further, but as far as like exploring the character, they've done more to explore the character in other games. Just kind of feels like Sub-Zero is sort of the side character in this overall story. He's still a protector of Earthrealm. He's still a leader. He's still gonna be... He still holds the role of, like, the leader with ice powers. They didn't explore his character dynamic with these changes in a way that I feel like changed his character in any sort of significant way. Some could say that's a bad thing, because one of the best things about Beyond, one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite characters, is because he has this arc, and he has this relationship with Smoke and Scorpion that I would say is a little more interesting, but I'm not gonna knock planting seeds, because that could be what this is trying to build up to, is planting seeds for this character. But as far as in this game, it's in this lane, in my opinion. Some could say differently, and I wouldn't necessarily argue anybody who wants to say that it was changed and that it affected in any sort of positive and negative way. But I feel like there's other characters that were done dirtier or were changed in ways that felt insignificant because of those changes, and it took away from a dynamic within the lore and stuff than Sub-Zero. He doesn't get his lore in the first game. He dies in the first game. So Bi-Han is still alive. So, I mean, I can't really, like... I don't know. He's essentially still Bi-Han in Mortal Kombat 1. You're gonna not see Nitara for the change but still good, but Nitara is basically the same, and I meant to add them to this. They're so basically the same, they're almost akin to Chirrus. Unlike fighting for sort of separation from Outworld, they are now already separate from Outworld, her and her people, but are now dying of starvation due to overpopulation. A different motive, but again, like the changes made to Sub-Zero, I don't think that they affect her character in any just sort of grand, splendorous way. If anything, I feel like a lot of the components of the character in the game aren't as interesting as some of the other classic characters that felt like they were like obscure characters that were brought back for reasons and made better. Nitara being here is interesting. I feel like, hey, remember them? But they don't add a whole lot to the overall narrative with the changes made to them in a way that I think is fruitful. Now, with all of this negativity and just general tepidness aside, let's get into some positive things. You know, I have dogged on this game a lot throughout the last couple of videos that I've talked about this game in, and I figured I would spin it around, you know, talk about some things I do like, because I do like some parts of MK1 and its new lore. You know, as a guy who really appreciates the characters in this series, there are some that stayed good in my eyes. Case in point, Kenshi. I think Kenshi's great in this game. I like that there's a link between him and Johnny, because Johnny's the one that gets the sword that he's after, the one that gives him his powers. I love how it creates a sort of different sort of drive for his character as well, and I think that it sticks to the landing. I like that you see him get blinded in this. You don't necessarily, I don't feel like it was necessary, but I like that they worked that in. There's a couple instances like that in this game where it's like Liu Kang was like, and this is how this person gets this, you know. There are some parts about the character relationship changing that I feel like get a little fanficky, and there's some moments like that in character beats, but I think that those moments in the character beats I think are more interesting, or at least more rewarding, and I like Kenshi's in this game. I think that it's a cool evolution. I also like that if there was to be a protector of Earthrealm, and it is now Liu Kang, I like that he still gives Raiden basically his slot in the world. You know, now Raiden is the champion for Earthrealm, and I like his arc in the story. I mean, Raiden's my favorite character in Mortal Kombat, so I like that he is now the protagonist of this timeline. I do appreciate where they take his character, and he's fun to play still, just to get back into the sort of gameplay discussion portion of the video game video. Raiden's fun online. I wouldn't say I'm like great with Raiden, but I had some fun combo game flexing when I played. It was fun. It was a good time. If I were to get the game to do anything with, I would love playing Raiden. I didn't end up playing him the most online, but it was good. I liked Raiden in the game, and I liked him in the story. As far as like adapting what I would say is one of the bigger criticisms I would throw to the game into creating an interesting character out of it, or a character with motive in a way that hadn't been fully fleshed out necessarily. Baraka. Baraka is interesting in Mortal Kombat 1. He's now like an outworlder who just got infected with Tarkatan, and now he has like a family and somebody to love, and it's just an interesting like shift in his character sort of identity, it feels like, in a way that I feel like, again, it's kind of weird because it's an immediate sort of impact of Tarkatan being a disease. You know, now he's just trying to persevere in spite of this, you know, infection. But, like, he could have just been a Tarkatan. I don't know. I still think it's a really dumb idea. I don't like it. But if you're gonna keep Baraka for some reason and include that in there, they at least did something with him that I think is cool or good. Not bad. It's not bad. And actually, I was going to put him in the made better tier, but again, just to kind of give him a swap. I mean, Raiden becoming Liu Kang and Liu Kang becoming Raiden, but to a degree, is kind of an interesting power dynamic. You know, while he did shape this timeline, he kind of nerfs himself so that he could play out this weird fantasy. And, I don't know, he's fine. Liu Kang retaining all of his sort of past in knowledge, but now becoming a god is the definition of changed, but still good. If anything, it's the definition of made better. But outside the bullshit that comes with him becoming a god and what it introduces as far as like multiverse theory into the Mortal Kombat universe, I would say knocks it down, because I really fucking hate that multiverse is in Mortal Kombat. I just don't think it's needed. It leads to a bettering of a character that kind of had nothing going on, but like as far as like it impacting Liu Kang for the better, I don't think it did. I love his story throughout the original timeline, and I know that he kind of takes like a relative backseat in the second timeline, but like, I don't know, he ends up becoming a god, and now he is Raiden, but fire. And these, I would say, are the characters that make it out of MK1 net positive. Because this is net neutral, but it's already positive. It's just different. This is the same, but good. Reptile's probably the character made the most interesting in the new world, though. Because, like, now he's an outcast of his people because he can shapeshift into being a person. He's from, like, this reptile civilization. And now he's, like, looked at negatively, so he joins the good guys. And it's an interesting character that has some cool moments in the story. And I think that as far as, like, taking a character that I think is neat, I've always liked Reptile to some capacity. I think that the direction they took the character in later games is fine, if not as cool. But I like where they took those roots of ideas and adapted them into something better with him here. I love the design of his character. I love the shapeshift, the way the shapeshifting looks. It just creates a cool visual that I think sticks the landing. While we're keeping it in the realms of like the palette swap ninjas, Smoke, I would say, is also made better, because in the original games, he was kind of just like a blind diva out of the Lin Kuei turned into a cyborg and sort of a harbinger of like, don't have blind faith in everybody, but like, in this game now he's the brother, or like an estranged brother, because his family was killed by the Lin Kuei, and so the Lin Kuei took him in out of guilt for killing his family because they just happened to stray into their territory, and taught him their ways, and he grew to have this relationship with Scorpion and Sub-Zero that I would say is for the better for a character that has a lesser sort of archetype to them, as far as like one of the epitomes of a character that's cool and grows to have a cool dynamic with other characters, made more interesting right out the gate. Smoke is absolutely that. Equally so, to kind of keep it into the realms of that ideology, Havoc, a character that is from Chaos Realm that no longer exists in this universe, but because of multiverse theory and the like, becomes the villain of this story by its end, or at least a version of Havoc, setting up a sort of blind love of the chaos of the multiverse. I also love the scene of him getting his face all fucked up. I think that as far as like the fanficky character birth moments visually, Havoc's is the best. Havoc was kind of a non-character. Havoc almost made the list for my favorite MK characters list, because I like the idea of Chaos Realm and this character just bashed in the world of chaos. But ultimately, they didn't do a whole lot with that character in the mythos. And in this timeline, Liu Kang kind of sets Havoc up to be another big baddie guy up there with, like, Quan Chi, and Shang Tsung is like a guy becoming one of the ultimate beings, or akin to the ultimate beings. Now, the smallest change that feels like it's made that has the biggest impact on a non-character, in my opinion, in like the general Mortal Kombat mythos, Li Mei, added in Deadly Alliance, I feel like is made more interesting and therefore better with just the concept of her town, where she's from, serving as the capital of Outworld, and therefore creating a relationship between her and Sindel, and by proxy helping shape some of the story. She's an interesting character in this, and actually, like, plays well on top of that. It's a cool character that had, like, some fun fighting styles in that era, but sort of swept under the rug in a lot of the new additions, like Natara, that were added to Deadly Alliance. But I like that the bringing back of this character sort of plants some cool ideas within her and how she shapes the world of Mortal Kombat and how it affects the story as a whole. I like that she has more going on and sort of adds to the narrative in a fun way. It's giving the opportunity for these underrated characters, or potentially underrated characters, a chance to have something more going on, and in a way that I think is simple but effective. Equally so, to maybe a greater degree, Tanya, I think, is made better because she has this dynamic with the players at hand, because she is amongst the ranks of the protectors of the royal family, just like Li Mei used to be before tragedy struck and a divide was created between these two parties. I like that she's stripped of a lot of the sort of corruption that was driving her to, like, the evil stuff she was doing, just like Sindel was, but I think is also made better as a result because of some of the sort of things it creates within her dynamic of the story. And that's kind of the biggest summation I can give to a lot of the things that were made better by these three characters, honestly, thinking about it, because Sindel gets to still say Queen, but now she just doesn't have Shao Kahn, and that dynamic separated creates a different experience altogether. It's like the butterfly effect in real time with these three. Like, one change really shaped these three for the better in a way that I think is still interesting, or more interesting than some of the lack of sort of depth to their characters that were presented in previous incarnations. I like Sindel in this game. She's very much the sort of lead political party in a sort of political drama sort of sense in some instances, but I like what she does in the story, and oddly enough, she was the one I played online the most. She had some combos that I learned quick and used to my advantage online quickly. I like this character well enough in the originals. I don't think that, like unlike Tanya, who was on the bottom of my worst of lists, if only for personal frustrations, it wasn't necessarily steeped in a lot of her lore stuff as some of the stuff higher up on that list. But I didn't have the same indifference that I did with, like, Li Mei. You know, I think that Sindel was fine, if not necessarily the most interesting piece of the world. She had a relationship with characters that I did like, but I think she was made better in this. Ashra is just a character that I think is neat, and is still neat, if not in a better sense in this game. I had more investment in Ashra in this game than I thought I would when she popped up in the story. I was like, really? Ashra's in this? Because she's in Deception for a little bit, and she's like a demon now. I don't necessarily hate her in the original timeline, but I would say she's more interesting to follow. She feels like a sort of a result of the negative circumstance being changed in this timeline. She's sort of a reflection of the old timeline coming in a more adapted but more interesting sort of way. And that's how I'd rank the changes made to these characters by Liu Kang, made by Liu Kang when shaping his new timeline in Mortal Kombat 1 that dropped last year. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. If you liked it, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm going to go. I've been Viral. You guys have a good day's lives and situations, and I'll see you another day.